With the first pick, welcome to the Fantasy Rant podcast presented by Stadium Rant. I'm your host, Dan Baker, accompanied by our co-hosts Mason Beck and Lee Cook, here to talk about Week 1. It's official. Football is back. We are here to cover all of the biggest takeaways from each and every game. And then we're going to give you each one overreaction pulling away from Week 1. Let's dive into it. We got a lot of games to talk about. Our show's on Wednesday, so we didn't get a chance to recap the Thursday game. Baltimore at Kansas City. Kansas City wins 27-20, and I'm going to send it to Mason here. What is your biggest takeaway from this game? Oh, you're muted, but yeah, Mason.
Oh, my bad. My biggest takeaway is that Derrick Henry's going to be very touchdown dependent. I was kind of worried about that coming into the season. His efficiency was bad. I believe it was only around like 3.5 yards per carry. Yeah, it was. Didn't get any receptions. I'm not 100% sure. I believe he did get targeted. No receptions. 13 carries, 46 yards, and a touchdown. That's a 10-point performance right there. It's not what we're looking for necessarily from Henry with how high we drafted him. And there's going to be some weeks where he doesn't score some touchdowns. There's obviously going to be weeks he produces more rushing yards and, does add a catch or two, but it's a scary sign for him.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think the biggest takeaway there, not as much Derrick Henry. The usage was a little concerning. Just the offensive line. We knew they had 3 new starters. They were dominated by the Kansas City defensive line, and that is one of the better defensive lines in the league. Chris Jones is a beast. They won't be up against that level of D-line, and they won't be in that game script a ton. I do expect Baltimore still to be playing from ahead. However, if Keaton Mitchell can return to form at some point this season, he's a much better player than Justice Hill. He's much more dynamic. I would expect him to even get more looks than what Justice Hill is going to get. So kind of what I was saying, guys, I mean, not to toot my own horn after 1 week, but I was pretty down on Derrick Henry. And I think to return his draft value, he's going to have to score 15 touchdowns this year.
See, that's the thing. I feel like this game, it had to be played differently. They're trying to keep up with Kansas City. They have to throw the ball. Kansas City also did a great job of keeping Mark Andrews on the wraps. They were bracketing him on both sides, giving him a lot of attention, making sure they took him away. But heading into next week, just for Derrick Henry, plays the Raiders. I feel like even though they also have a very solid front seven, this will be more so the test for me. I just think the Ravens had to throw the ball much more than they are going to in most games, trying to keep up with the Chiefs. My biggest takeaway, though, I think that Isaiah Likely is going to be potentially the second most he's going to have the second most fantasy points as a receiver on this team. I think Likely could be more involved than Flowers in the red zone. And even though in this game specifically, it was tons of line him up at the tight end, run a flat route, let him get some yak yards, I do think that he will be utilized more downfield. And I think that Zay Flowers, his ADOT is just so low. Unless they start changing that up, that could be trouble for Flowers moving forward, especially if the passing volume decreases like I'm expecting it to. And I'll save the other half of this for later in the show. The only other thing I wanted to bring up is Pacheco's that dude. He's the workhorse. He got 80% of the snaps. And really quick, Justice Hill did out-snap Derrick Henry 54% to 46%. So kind of similar to the Tyjae Spears scenario last year. When it's pass-heavy game script, look for Derrick Henry to have a bad game. When they're projected to win, when they're the favorites, that's when you can fire up Derrick Henry with confidence. All right, let's jump into the next one. 16 games to cover, so we're going rapid fire today. The Friday night game, Green Bay at Philly. Philly took this one 34-29. Lee, I'll kick it your way first this time.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot to take away. To me, the biggest thing, the biggest question going in was the wide receiver core for Green Bay. And even though Romeo Dobbs did have one more target, Jaden Reed is wide receiver one for the Packers. I don't know how valuable that's going to be with Malik Willis back there, but he's a guy who was the consensus, or him and Watson were very close. I think it's clearly Jaden Reed as the number one. He's the big play guy. It was very encouraging to see the game he had. Obviously, the Philly secondary has some issues, so we'll see. But if there's any guy on that Green Bay offense, and you're not going to be able to get him this week, but a couple of weeks from now, Malik Willis is what we think Malik Willis is. People are kind of gonna forget that week one performance. May be able to go ahead and scoop up JB. Definitely in Dynasty, that could be somewhere where you could get him for cheaper than what you will right now or a week ago. But he looks like the long term guy.
Mason?
My biggest takeaway from this week was that between that game was that Saquon showed that he really does have the potential to be the RB1 at the end of the year, especially now with McCaffrey, missing week one, probably missing week two. Saquon's going to be an absolute workhorse. We all knew he was going to take, majority of the snaps, majority of the carries. 24 carries. The next running back was Kenneth Gainwell with 1 carry. 109 yards on the ground from Barkley, 23 yards and 2 receptions, 3 total touchdowns. They're going to try to use him every way I think that's possible in the red zone. And I think he's just going to be a touchdown monster, and this showed the potential against it. And Green Bay is not a bad defense at all. I mean, for Philly to just kind of go in there and, look good for a majority of the game after the first quarter, I believe, after, they did have their slow start. But that just showed to me that Saquon's probably going to be a touchdown monster this year in most scenarios. And he's also going to add on a good amount of yards and a couple catches every single game to, really give that that running back one potential.
Yeah, and just to speak, that was also my biggest takeaway in a sense. Saquon had 9 opportunities inside of the 20-yard line, 8 rushing attempts for 33 yards, 2 touchdowns, and another reception for 18 yards in the touchdown. I'm not expecting this touchdown upside every week, but I do think that a lot of people were nervous about, Jalen Hurts, the tush push. How much is he going to take away from Saquon in the red zone? And I feel like those can be at least a little bit put to rest with Saquon having a 3-touchdown day. I do think that it was later in the game. Jalen Hurts went for that tush push like they always do, and he didn't even get his hands on the ball. Went straight down, and I think it was Kenneth Gainwell actually who pounced on it back there. Not saying that's predictive for the rest of the year, but it's definitely giving everybody that's a Barkley owner a little bit more reassurance moving forward. All right. On to the next one. We got Pittsburgh at Atlanta. Pittsburgh took this one 18-10. Justin Fields got the start with Russell Wilson. Is a calf injury, right? Yeah, I think it was.
I believe so.
Anyways, he got the start. He played a game manager role in this one. Really didn't do too much. However, he didn't need to. Atlanta didn't put up much. Kirk Cousins looked god awful. And really they just kicked field goal after field goal after field goal until they won this game. So what are the big takeaways that you had for this one, Mason?
So in this game, my main takeaway is that touchdowns may be very scarce for this Pittsburgh offense. Obviously, they scored 6 field goals, so it's easy to say that off 1 week. I didn't really see any big play factor from them, though, in week 1. Obviously, they didn't score any touchdowns. Fields, Tomlin didn't seem to necessarily trust Fields to really let the ball go deep, try to get these big plays and really push them down the field. It's a very conservative style play. And that's just in general is going to limit the amount of touchdowns It's going to be long drives. Most of them are not going to end in 6. It's going to end in 3. It's just scary, especially having a running back. Uh, Patterson got some work. Warren didn't get a ton of work, but recovering from the hamstring injury, should come back. It just makes that whole running back room a lot more worrisome because they're not going to score much touchdowns.
Yeah, that's fair. Lee, what are your takeaways?
So one, I would say, clearly 20 carries for 70 yards isn't great, but that percentage of the workload, this is going to be a ball control offense. If they score 17 a game, the Steelers are going to win at least 10 games with that defense. I actually feel more encouraged with Najee Harris, even though it wasn't a great game. I think he's clearly the guy. Obviously, Jaylen Warren is still coming back from that injury, but between him, he's really going to split that RB2 role with Cordell Patterson. I think he had 2 catch. Jaylen Warren had 2 catches and 2 carries, where Cordell Patterson had 4 carries. But if you look at, especially if it's still Justin Fields, 14 rushes for him, 20 rushes for Najee. I don't really have any confidence in anyone in the offense beyond Najee. Pickens didn't have a bad game by any means. 6 for 85 on 7 targets, and I think that chemistry will improve. But to me, those are really the only 2 startable assets on the Steelers. Atlanta is the big one for me, though. It was obviously, we knew Kirk Cousins. His injury was later than Aaron Rodgers. We knew that even though he's not a mobile quarterback, just the lack of being able to plant and deliver the deep ball was very concerning. Drake London not being involved. You look at Atlanta's schedule; they are at the Eagles, Chiefs at home, Saints at home, Bucks at home. Those are the next 4 games. They could easily be 0-5. 1-4 looks like probable. They may be favored against the Saints. They're going to be underdogs in those other 3 games. If they're 1-4, 0-5, going into Panthers week, and we haven't seen a huge improvement from Kirk Cousins, is it Michael Penix time already? You've invested. It's an early first-round pick. You need to win. You are a new coaching staff, so you have some leeway. But how far do they let this go down the road before we see Michael Penix? And outside of Bijan Robinson, who do you feel super confident starting next week?
Super confident, nobody. But Philly's secondary is pretty vulnerable. I would be okay with starting Drake London, preferably as like a flex option. Outside of that, Kyle Pitts was really only saved by that touchdown. This was a bad week for tight ends in general. And no matter who you drafted, you really weren't happy with their performance for the most part. So not a ton of upside, but I'll let Mason answer your question.
I'm still going to trust Drake London. Steelers defense is a very tough defense. Kirk Cousins still finding his rhythm into this offense. There was certain times where we weren't even sure if he would even be ready for week 1. He's still not fully recovered from an Achilles. It's a tough defense to play, just their style on your first game back. They will improve. So I'm still trusting in Drake London and trusting in, of course, Bijan Robinson either way. But those are the 2 that I'm still starting no matter what.
You have to start Drake London based on where you draft, where you picked him in the draft, where you had to pick him to get him, and unless you really hit on some guys later. But I don't think anybody feels super confident. You're nervous even against Philly. Anybody, and I was a huge Drake London guy, so I'm starting him on a ton of teams. I'm nervous. I'm very nervous.
Yeah. I do have him on the team, and I am sitting him next week. This is a team where I have like tons of options at wide receiver. But yeah, so the guys I'm starting over him next week are AJ Brown at Atlanta, Rashee Rice versus Cincinnati, and I am starting Malik Neighbors because he's going up against Washington. Sorry, Lee, but good thing that the radio can't hear your middle finger. But no, yeah, I think that Drake London, he's still going to be a boomer bust guy. Kirk Cousins, it's his first game back off the Achilles injury. That's tough as is, like he hasn't played football in quite some time. And even during the offseason, he wasn't going through the full motions like he would be if he wasn't coming off an Achilles. So I do think he'll improve with time. He's always been a very stable pocket passing quarterback that supported his top guy. So I think it'll come around. But to my top takeaway from this game is that the stars are going to be more, even though it was disheartening seeing how Drake London, Bijan Robinson, and kind of Kyle Pitts, despite the touchdown, they were on the field much more often than they were in the year prior or any time in Arthur Smith's coaching career there. Arthur Smith in 2023 had Bijan on the field for 68% of snaps, Drake London for 81% of snaps, and Kyle Pitts for 64% of snaps. It's only one game, small sample size, but Kyle Pitts on the field for 86% of snaps. Now, Drake London on for 100% of the snaps, and Bijan for 89. All of them went up at least 20%. Drake London was 19%, but all of them have been on the field much more often. I just think they need Kirk Cousins to start cooking. And like you said, Lee, if he doesn't in 3-4 weeks, they got a first round quarterback that has a lot of talent that they can throw in there. All right.
I'll be curious to see how that goes because I mean,
Right.
you give him $100 million, you gotta kind of give him some leash, but then you draft a quarterback in the top 10. I mean, it's yeah, Arthur Blank's not getting any younger. He wants to win. I would think that could very likely be some pressure from the owner's box if things don't turn around quickly.
Right. Yeah. Especially since he's the one that's dealing out the money. If he's like, hey, it's my money, start Penix. That's what I want right now. And I mean, I forgot what the debacle was in the draft room, but I remember there being a lot of like, dismay between the general manager and the owner. Did not seem like they were on the same page when they drafted Penix. Hopefully, they get on the same page. Hopefully, the players get on the same page. Well, let's move on to the next one here. We have Arizona heading to Buffalo. Buffalo took this one 34-28. It was a nail biter for the Bills fans. They did not have the lead until late in the game. Ended up securing it though. What was your biggest takeaway, Lee, from this game?
It's got to be Marvin Harrison, right? I mean, this guy was drafted higher than any rookie wide receiver in the history of fantasy. He gets 3 targets, 1 catch for 4 yards. And I have quite a bit of Marvin Harrison, and there was specifically there's one GIF out there of him running open or video where you see he's running open and Kyler just doesn't get him the ball. We'll see. I mean, we know rookie receivers can start a little slow, but just the lack of target share for a guy who was pretty much across the board hyped up as the alpha. He's really the only guy they had. That's very concerning and kind of 1B there for me. I watched a lot of that game. I'd say of the 1 o'clock games, that's probably the one I watched the most of. Real football, watching it, Kyler Murray looked great. He looked really good. He was fast when he was running. You get to the end of it, and it's a fairly mediocre fantasy performance. Buffalo's defense is somewhat questionable, but you score 28 points, and you're only able to muster that 1 touchdown for Kyler Murray. He had 57 yards rushing, only 162 passing. I'm hoping we see a lot more out of the Cardinals offense because as good as it was in real football, it was not great for fantasy across the board for the Cardinals.
Mason, really quick before we kick it to you, I did just pulled up Kyler Murray just now. As of 8 minutes ago, it says Cardinals Kyler Murray appeared on the injury report Wednesday, but was listed as a full participant. I don't know if maybe he tweaked the knee, and maybe that's why we saw a little bit of change in the game after the halftime. Because I agree, he looked amazing in the first half, especially, and then after that, it definitely the offense sputtered. So we'll see how that goes. Keep your eye on Kyler Murray. It seems like he'll be fine since he was a full participant on Wednesday. But we'll see how it goes. Keep your eye on that injury report. Mason, what did you have for this game as your biggest takeaway?
that all Buffalo wide receivers are still a little hard to trust right now.
You guys took my two. Those are the two takeaways I had as well. Go ahead, Mason.
Like, when you look at it, the person who got the most targets was actually Keon Coleman. Got 5 targets, 4 receptions, which I believe was the highest. 4 receptions was the highest amount as well. Yeah, it was. Um, the next closest after that was 3 with Shakir and 3 with James Cook. Dawson Knox and Kincaid both only pulled in 1 reception for on 2 targets. Both struggled. Both tight ends getting the same amount of work in the passing game is a little worrying. I mean, the Bills, for the way that game plan kind of went, only throwing the ball 23 times, that is pretty worrying. It doesn't really seem like this passing game has any identity yet. Josh Allen's obviously still going to produce points always because his rushing upside, and he'll always get good yards. But everyone else besides him and James Cook, it's a risky start going forward. If they don't get a touchdown, it's not going to be a good game. If Shakir and Mac Collins didn't get a touchdown, besides them, Keon Coleman's the only one that would be worth starting this last week.
And even then, 9.1 points in full PPR. He
Yeah.
was on the field by far the most, though. Keon Coleman, 73% snap share. Curtis Samuel was hampered by the injury. He only had 27% of snaps. And then Matt Collins, 58. Khalil Shakir, 53. Dalton Kincaid was on the field much more often than Dawson Knox, but he ended up having a worse day. Both had 2 targets, 1 reception. Knox's went for 23 yards. I'm a little bit worried for Kincaid. And since you guys took my 2 takeaways in this game, I will say Kincaid is my biggest worry of the Bills starters. I honestly wasn't very high on Keon Coleman. I was kind of mid-tier for Curtis Samuel, even with his late ADP. So really, I was only taking Dawson Knox of this bunch or James Cook. James Cook still looked like James Cook. He just is going to have the limited touchdown upside with Josh Allen being that dude. And Dalton Kincaid is my biggest worry from this. If I'm a Dalton Kincaid manager in redraft, and he has another 2 games like this, by the 3rd week, I'm going to be looking to see if I can get anything from him, anything reliable. Maybe someone with like an Evan Ingram would be willing to try to take the shot on that upside. So that's where I'm sitting here. We're gonna move on.
Just to interject real quick. I kind of take the opposite view with Keon Coleman. I was encouraged by, as a rookie, a guy who we kind of heard throughout camp, maybe he wasn't ready. He still had a lot of work to do, and maybe it's just a comparison to Marvin Harrison. But you look at, excuse me, you look at what Keon Coleman did for his first professional game for a guy who's supposed to be raw. I think he's clearly the wide receiver 1. And if we don't see a big increase for Dalton Kincaid, he's probably the top target getter on the year. But at the very least, he showed he's ready for the NFL. And he's a guy who, if I drafted him, I'm pretty happy right now. I like his upside for the season. I'm scared to death of all my Dalton Kincaid shares because, wow.
Yeah. And just to build on that really quick, the Cardinals defense is not scary at all. Their starting cornerbacks are Starling Thomas, who I do not know who that is, to be honest, and then Sean Murphy Bunting, who has never been super impressive. I just don't think that this was a great test for him in week 1, and Keon Coleman having 4 catches, 51 yards, that's solid for a rookie performance in his first game. But for that to be the top performance of the wide receivers gives me some worry in general. All right, let's move on to Tennessee at Chicago. This was a weird game. Chicago, what's up?
I said woof.
Woof. Yeah, right. So much hype behind Caleb Williams. We've all talked about it. He has the best scenario heading into his rookie season as a first overall draft pick. With that, he does nothing. Looked atrocious overall. Rome Odunze does go down in this game and is likely to miss some time. But you can't attribute all of his poor performance to that. Chicago ends up taking this one 24-17, did not score a single offensive touchdown. They had blocked a kick and returned it and had an pick six. That's how they scored. That's how they came back. Um, Tennessee was up 17-0 at one point in the game. And then thanks to Will Levis doing Will Levis things, almost getting sacked, just chucks the ball. It's like, dude, come on. You had some years of experience in college at the bare minimum at any level of football. That is not okay. So what are you guys pulling away from this game? What are your fantasy takeaways? Mason, I'll send it your way first.
My biggest takeaway was I was very disappointed with how much Spears was used. He did get 45% of the snap percentage. Pollard, I believe, got 61, so not too far behind him. Pollard got 16 carries. Spears only got 4. Spears was pretty efficient, though. 4 carries, 21 yards, a little over 5 yards per carry. That's pretty solid. He did manage to bring in 4 receptions for 11 yards. Pollard also got 4 targets as well. That's the thing. We were really thinking 1A, 1B system going into the season.
That's what I said the whole
That's what they
off
said.
season.
Yeah, they said it all off season, and we thought maybe Spears would emerge as the 1A. We were more confident he'd be the 1B, but it's looking like he's might be more of a it's going to be Pollard's going to be the 1A and Spears is the 1B minus or something like that. Is my best way of
I
saying
think
it.
1 and 2, like RB1 and RB2 is what you're looking for.
Yeah, but I still think we're going to get a lot more. I still think Spears is going to get more work than your average RB2. So
Really quick, I'm just gonna toss mine in then because mine is I think Tajay Spears is a trade for target. I even on Pollard's breakaway run, he did not look fast. He did not look like the same Pollard from 2 years ago when he had that juice. Tajay Spears still got the juice. I personally, I maybe don't rush it, but I do think that Tajay Spears is going, in my opinion, going to take over the RB1 position by the end of the season. That's where I stand. Lee, where you stand?
I just offered Tajay Spears for Jake Ferguson in a league where I'm very tight end needy. We'll see what happens with that. I hope you're right and the guy rejects it. And if you're wrong, I hope he accepts it. I've got good running back depth in that league. So, to me, one, just to mention, I don't know if anybody else saw this comment, but Brian Callahan said, I think it was yesterday, he said if they had just punted every possession on first down, they would have won the game. That's not exactly a vote of confidence for your second-year quarterback and your offense as a whole. Other thing, just you mentioned the interception from Levis. I'm curious what your guys' take is. I think we all played football at some lower level, high school, whatnot. So your quarterback throws just a god-awful, back-breaking, terrible interception. And instead of making any effort at all to try to help make the tackle, he's on his knees in despair.
Like hands on the helmet.
That's just as bad as throwing the interception.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. You got to get up and do the thing. I just over the weekend went to a Pirates game, and in the 9th inning, man on first and second, up 1 run. The Pirates are trying to close it out in the bottom of the 9th. Hits a little rope into the, right between the fielders, the right fielder and the center fielder. Right fielder sprints, makes a diving play, ball in his glove. He hits the ground, ball pops out. He's on his knees. He's injured, and granted, I know how that goes. He didn't move. So now the guy from first scores and they take the lead rather than just the guy from second. I'm not even a Pirates fan. And I got up and I was like, what the are you doing, dude? Like, get up, throw the ball. I don't know if it's your right wrist is that injured, but if it's me, I'm throwing it left-handed. I'm going to look silly. I'm going to look silly, but I'm getting up and I'm trying, It's so frustrating when you see that type of lack of effort, So I so fully agree with you. I don't want my quarterback to get injured trying to tackle a guy. However, you got to do something. Show that you give a shit about the team.
Yep.
You know. So yeah, I'm also very passionate about that. If you could tell.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. Basically.
As far as the game as a whole, Wolf again. The Bears offense that we had so much hope for. You're in trouble if you invested heavily or high on any of these Bears players, to be honest. Maybe Rome getting hurt does help. DJ and Keenan Allen. I mean, they did have 19 targets between them, but only 9 catches. And you're talking, what's that? 55 yards? No, 65 yards. Still, I mean, that's atrocious. Caleb Williams did not look ready for prime time. I know he was talking about he got the win, blah, blah, blah. That's great for real football. He did nothing for your fantasy team. If you had him as your backup quarterback, go ahead and free that roster spot up. I know we're a day past waivers, but it's going to take a while. And this is going to be a team that they're going to win games on the back of their defense. I don't know if DeAndre Swift at 10 carries for 3 yards, no catches. That's another guy who I thought was going too high.
I agree.
If that continues, that was weird. You froze with a shocked face for a second on me, Dan, and I was just like, I hope he's not having a stroke. DeAndre, I mean, you've got guys back there. You've got Khalil Herbert. You've got Roshan, who did not touch the ball.
Yeah, he's a healthy scratch.
To me, that's criminal. Especially, I don't imagine he'll be a scratch coming into this week with the way the backfield performed. But I don't want to start any Bear. If you drafted DJ Moore highly, you probably have to. But I'm out on the Bears offense after one game.
Yeah, really quick, just on that. I don't know why, because Roshan was not on the injury report heading into the game. But they had Kari Blasingame.
He plays a lot of fullback.
Okay.
Blasingame plays a lot of fullback.
Okay, then scratch that though. But Travis Homer. Travis Homer's a classic, scat back. He's going to catch some passes out the backfield. I know he's probably put in there for special teams, but I would much rather have Roshan Johnson available to me than Travis Homer returning kicks. And what did he even do with that? So I don't understand why Roshan was held out. Even with Khalil Herbert being the third RB, he ended up having an 11% snap share. When DeAndre Swift when he has 10 carries for 30 yards, why are you not giving Khalil Herbert a little bit more opportunity? The guy's averaged around 5 yards per clip for his entire career. Like, give him the ball a little bit more. Let's see what he can do. We'll see how it goes moving forward. You guys basically hit my big 2 points there. The other one, just basically, DeAndre Hopkins was more injured than they were leading on. He was left off the final injury report. He played 27% of snaps. I'm not trusting him until he proves it. And I do think that he's going to have a role different from last year. He had an insane ADOT and yards per reception last year. He had the most targets of 20 plus yards in the league. Hopkins, I think this year with Ridley joining the team, will be more of the possession wide receiver. And I like that for him if it wasn't for Will Levis being the quarterback. He just wants to take shots downfield. So not trusting Hopkins until I see it. If we don't see it for another 2 or 3 weeks, I would say Hopkins is a cut candidate.
Agreed.
All right. We got New England at minute 8:32. So 2 minutes ago, we got say something about Drake London from Sports Forensics. We talked about Drake London much earlier. Just really quick, we'll touch on it. We don't think, to recap for all of us, we don't think that Drake London is completely going away, but Kirk Cousins' poor performance is worrying. If he doesn't show that he can come back from this Achilles injury and actually do something, it's going to be Penix. And then that's going to be another question mark moving forward. Having drafted him in the second round, you might want to try to get that value through a trade while you can. But overall, I think most of us are at least pretty confident that he will return to top 20 wide receiver soon enough. Did I recap that well enough, boys?
Absolutely. And I wouldn't trade him right now because you're going to get pennies on the dollar. If you don't believe season long, I think you got to try to hope he has a good game in the next couple of weeks and then trade him. But there were a lot of guys, top end wide receivers that didn't deliver. I mean, look at Chris Olave and their offense looked dominant.
Yeah.
So we'll see. One game, first quarter, first game for the offensive coordinator, first with Kirk Cousins back from injury, and against a great defense. Let's give him some time.
Right. A lot of moving pieces there. To hit our next game, we got New England heading to Cincinnati. New England took this one 16-10. Messed up my Survivor League. They make us lock in this league on Thursday. And as soon as T. Higgins was ruled out the next day, I texted the guys like, yo, can I switch my pick? Because bad vibes surrounding this game. Then on top of it, Jamar Chase goes, I will start if I want to start. No other factors, no team, no nothing. He wants that contract, and if he isn't going to get it, it's up to him. Bad juju around the game. They end up losing. They looked bad. I will say my biggest takeaway is that the Bengals always start slow. The last 2 years, it has been ugly. They do not look right most of the time starting off the year. One of my big takeaways is let it settle. T. Higgins will come back from the hamstring injury. New England always does a great job of taking away your top option. That was Jamar Chase, who has not practiced throughout the offseason because of the contract dispute. So already going to be a struggle without New England doing such a great job of taking away the top option. And they have solid cornerbacks on that defense. So I'm not overall worried on the whole of the season for Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. However, I do think that they're going to need T. Higgins to come back because there's no great second option on this team.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Bengals will definitely be getting better. Like we said, they always start off slow. It's been a mess with that wide receiver situation between Chase and Higgins, like you said. They also struggled. The running game wasn't bad. Zach Moss, 9 carries for 44 yards. It's not too bad. Chase Brown, 3 carries, 11 yards. They just couldn't really establish it at any point. It was just kind of Burrow trying to throw, them trying to force plays. But my biggest takeaway is this is kind of what I expect from the New England offense, fantasy-wise, going forward. No receiver really stepped forward. KJ Osborne got the most targets, I believe. Everyone else is just kind of the ball was spread around between everyone, between tight ends, between all the wide receivers. Ramondre also got some good targets. The ball's going to be spread around a lot as long as Brissett's in there, at least at the start of the season, unless Polk or Baker can really step forward. But Baker was even a coach's decision inactive.
Yep.
The only one who really did anything was Ramondre Stevenson, who got 25 carries. I don't see that happening. I think the game plan kind of favored them. Patriots aren't always going to be in that winning situation. They're going to be giving him 25 carries. The touchdown potential there is big. They're going to have 1 or 2 touchdowns a game probably. He's going to get a majority of them, I feel. But the amount of carries, that's not sustainable for me. I don't know if you guys feel that way as well, but 25 carries is a lot for a team that's probably going to struggle most of the season.
Yeah. I do agree with that. On top of it, Gibson had another 7. 32 rushing attempts is not likely from this team. Jacoby Brissett did a good job of game managing, but that's not always going to work against a team that is not struggling like the Bengals were in week 1. Lee?
Yeah, so I agree. For whatever reason, the Bengals always start slow. Their front office seems to be horrible. Give Jamar Chase what he's asking for. Get him happy. He's your star player. You're not going to let him walk. it's stupid. It's very stupid the way they do things. We saw how stupid Dallas was, how much money they ended up paying to CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott. It's dumb. But for the Bengals, a couple of things. So Zach Moss is clearly the running back one. There is no doubt. Chase Brown is running back two. You're without your star wide receiver two. Your wide receiver one hasn't been in camp, hasn't been practicing. You have one drive in the first half where your running back, Zach Moss, gets 2 carries. Everything else was 1 carry. The only drive in the entire game that Zach Moss got more than 2 carries was the touchdown drive. He had 4 carries for 36 yards. The majority of his usage, the majority of what he produced was in that drive. He scored the touchdown at the end. Why the hell are you not running the ball? They are a team. I know that he's not Joe Mixon. Okay, Joe Mixon looked great. We'll get to that in a minute. But you had success, maybe not the first couple of carries, but ended up with 4.9 yards a carry, and your running back only gets 9 carries. You have 12 running back carries the entire game. Some of that is game script, but you weren't that far behind. It was a horribly called offensive game plan, horrible performance from the new offensive coordinator. I hope they self-scout. I hope they see the key. What was not just having the star wide receivers, they established the run with Joe Mixon, and that opened up the play-action game with Joe Burrow. It opened up down the field stuff. They didn't run the ball. They lost, and they deserved to lose. But Zach Moss is your guy going forward.
All right. I do agree with that. The snaps were very much in Zach Moss's favor. They should have leaned on that more against New England. Really quick, I do want to toss up this question here from George Play 01 on YouTube. He says, George, hey guys, have Ferguson and JSN available on the waiver wire. Crazy that both of them are available, especially JSN, no injury. But my tight end is Kittle, and my wide receivers are Waddle. I'm assuming that's DJ Moore, Zay Flowers, A.D. Mitchell, and Brian Thomas Jr. He says, should I drop Trey Benson, Corum, or Adonai Mitchell for either JSN or or Jake Ferguson? Personally, without much more context on the style of the league, amount of players, formats in terms of PPR, I would lean towards Ferguson. George Kittle has always been pretty boom or bust. Brandon Ayuk was re-signed. Deebo Samuel is there. Christian McCaffrey will come back. Kittle already did not look. He didn't look terrible in comparison to the other tight ends. He goes 12 team non-PPR. So non-PPR does favor George Kittle and then big play wide receivers like Waddle, DJ Moore, A.D. Mitchell, and Brian Robinson. So I really do think the wide receivers are pretty much set on this team, and especially now hearing that it's not a PPR, JSN's value is going to drop. Jake Ferguson is at least the third target at worst if Brandon Cooks steps up into that second target role as the wide receiver 2 there. I will lean Jake Ferguson. I don't know how often you would start either of those 2 players, but I would drop personally Blake Corum for Jake Ferguson. I know you guys aren't big on we've disagreed on Blake Corum all year long. It's 1 week of sample size. So I'm not gonna go tooting my horn yet. But I've said that Kyron Williams is still the workhorse. Blake Corum isn't going to be the guy that ends up splitting the workload between a guy that has had immense success in this system at Kyron Williams. I really did not see that being the case. And so far through week 1, he has 0% snaps. I think that it'll overtake Ronnie Rivers as the RB2, but I don't think he's going to be worth rostering and redraft. So personally, that's who I would go with. On top of it, he says his running backs are Saquon Barkley, Jahmyr Gibbs, Brian Robinson, Javonte Williams, Jordan Mason, and Jalen Wright. I'm content with that depth. Of all of those running backs, Blake Corum's by far the lowest. So when are you going to start him? There's a chance AD Mitchell could work himself into what we just saw Alec Pierce do. They're clearly going to take shots downfield. Anthony Richardson only completed 9 passes, but it's for 200 plus yards. They're throwing the ball downfield. I think that AD Mitchell is more talented than Alec Pierce, so I'd rather have him as a late season shot than Blake Corum. The only reason Blake Corum is rostered over him in that scenario is because if Kyren Williams goes down, he could step up into at least an RB2 consistently.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, I would definitely drop Corum out of all those, getting 0% snap share. That's where I'd go. I would probably do Ferguson.
For a
Maybe
non-PPR league, it sounds like a standard league for non-PPR.
Yeah, just getting the 0%, and honestly, I don't see it improving massively over the next couple weeks. Make that pick. Someone goes down on your roster, someone else there is you want to drop over the next couple weeks. You'll be able to get Corum back.
Don't listen to these guys. Do not drop Blake Corum. You did not draft Blake Corum to drop him in week 2. He's a rookie running back. He didn't get a carry. We know he didn't get a touch. He is a potential league-winning player if Kyren Williams gets hurt. Jake Ferguson is not going to win you a league. I don't make any move. Yeah, you've got George Kittle. How often are you going to start Jake Ferguson over George Kittle? In a non-PPR league, never. On a bye week or if George Kittle gets hurt. I'm okay if George Kittle gets hurt streaming any tight end. If I were going to drop a running back, it would be Jalen Wright. Another running back who got no touches.
Jalen Wright heading into this game right now.
Another running. Jeff Wilson's the starter. And again, like I said, the injuries have already happened, but he's behind 3 guys right now in the pecking order. Yes, Blake Corum's behind 2. But again, Ronnie Rivers is not as talented as Jeff Wilson. He's never done anything in the NFL. We have seen Jeff Wilson be explosive at times. But there's no need. This is one of those things. If it were PPR, I was going to say drop Adonai Mitchell for JSN. But because it's not, I wouldn't do that. A second tight end does not give you anything here. There's no reason to pick up Jake Ferguson when you have George Kittle already.
If it was a full PPR league, JSN's the guy. He outsnapped Tyler Lockett this last game by a lot. Lockett outperformed him by a lot. I feel like that's a Geno thing personally. We'll probably talk about that coming up here. But ordinarily I'm not a guy who rosters 2 tight ends. However, Kittle's very, boom or bust. If it's one of those matchups where everyone's healthy and there's no competition in the other team, I do think that Jake Ferguson could be started over George Kittle in those scenarios. Whereas in a standard league where JSN is not getting as much as he should, I do think that Ferguson's still the guy to get there. I
just don't see how you would start him. Like I said, even in that scenario, you drafted Kittle at a not a great premium, not super high. You drafted him high enough for a tight end where you just don't know when those boom and bust weeks are coming. If you drop Blake Corum right now, I'm telling you, you are going to be playing against him later in the season. Kyren Williams is going to miss a few games, and it's how fantasy works. You're going to play against Blake Corum in an important game, and he is going to light you up.
He's hitting you on the emotions, and I think Lee's also feeling the emotions here. How long do you want to roster Blake Corum, though, before Kyren Williams maybe gets injured? What's he's going to be the handcuff? That's why I don't draft handcuffs to my players personally, is that you feel like you have to roster them. And then they just eat a roster spot when you could be taking shots on guys on the waiver wire. Let's say Jake Ferguson doesn't end up hitting in a little bit. You can move on from Jake Ferguson. If you end up just rostering Blake Corum and Kyren Williams is healthy for the next 10 games even, and then he misses 2 or 3 games and comes back. It's like, is that worth it? Is that worth the roster spot? Personally, I don't think so.
If he wins you 1 week, he's a starter. He wins you 1 week. Jake Ferguson will not win you a week.
All right. we have a difference on opinion there, but we're gonna we're gonna move on to the next one here. This was one of the most exciting games of the week. Houston at Indianapolis. Houston narrowly sneaks away with the win. It was a little bit more widespread in the fourth, but Houston takes this 29-27. CJ Stroud looked incredible. Nico Collins, the deep threat that we thought he is, still operated mainly as the wide receiver one and had the most snaps on this team. Stephon Diggs was second in snaps at 77%, with Tank Dell at 63%. The next wide receiver on the team had 15% snap share. So these are the three guys that are going to be on the field the vast majority of the time. Joe Mixon, absolute workhorse. And maybe that was part of the game plan for this week specifically, but it looks like they signed him for this short deal to just run him into the ground, and that's okay. All fantasy managers that are in redraft right now are giving the thumbs up. Joe Mixon has a day, 25.3 points in half PPR formats. Stephon Diggs really bailed out by the touchdowns. So that's one of my biggest takeaways. My two takeaways really from this game are CJ Stroud, as amazing as he looked from a real NFL standpoint, he still only scored 18.66 points in 4 point per passing touchdown leagues. That's solid. That's solid, but that's not worth the fifth round, sixth round draft pick that he was in redraft leagues. On the other hand, you have Anthony Richardson, who threw completed 9 passes, attempted 19, and comes away with 27 points. It's insane what he can offer you just with his legs alone. But the two biggest things are those quarterbacks with their value, and then Stephon Diggs is, in my opinion, trade away target immediately. The 2 touchdowns bailed him out. He's in the slot role. It's a low yardage per catch. It's not going to be efficient unless he continues to score 2 touchdowns per game. I don't really see Stephon Diggs returning on his ADP. So that's where I stand. Where do you guys have as your biggest takeaways for this game?
So real quick, Mason, I'll let you go, but I want to just respond to the first piece. And I was with you all off season. However, how many games are we going to get 160 yards from Joe Mixon? There's going to be games. There's going to be a lot of games where they need to throw the ball more. The Colts run defense looked really bad. Joe Mixon looked great. The Colts run defense looked really bad. I'm feeling better about where you drafted CJ Stroud after this game because he is him. He is that dude.
He is him.
He is so much better than Anthony Richardson. Not just, and I get the high upside with the rushing, but not only for real football. And I know that you just said the points. Anthony Richardson had 9 more points. If you're in Dynasty and you can trade Anthony Richardson for CJ Stroud, you do it right now. Anthony Richardson will not be in the league as a starter 2 to 3 years from now. But go ahead, Mason. I'll get mine.
I mean, kind of bounce off of, you saying CJ Stroud is him. There's a lot of questions this offseason, with Diggs, Collins, and Dell. Really, would one of them really step away and, the other two fall back? Would any of them fall back? That wasn't necessarily the case. Diggs did pretty solid. 1 carry, 6 yards, 6 receptions, 33 yards, 2 TDs. The 2 TDs definitely helped him out a lot. Nico Collins, 117 yards and 6 receptions. Tank Dell did put up the greatest fantasy performance. He got 2 carries, 19 yards, only 3 receptions for 40 yards, but he was targeted 7 times. CJ Stroud, it looks like he's going to be able to spread the ball well enough to where I am going to trust all 3 of these receivers in my starting lineup this season. There was a lot of worry about that. Any of 3 of those guys could be an absolute bust pick. But if CJ's throwing the ball 30 times like he did in this game, and he threw the ball 30 times or 32 times, Mixon carried it 30 times, that's a lot of carries. It still shows that these are the only 3 guys they're really going to pass to. Dalton Schultz a little bit, Mixon a little bit, but these 3 guys, they're going to consistently get a good amount of looks their way, and definitely calmed my nerves about having any of them on my roster.
Yeah, and this was a good team too that they went up against. Like the Colts, I think are going to surprise some people. I think overall they're better than what people think. At least by the end of the quarter, the biggest lead in this game was 5 points. So a pretty neutral game script throughout. I do think Mixon got a little bit more carries than I anticipated. Ended up being as a team 40 carries to 32 pass attempts. I do think that starts to lean back towards CJ Stroud's way, but I wasn't really too scared by the secondary specifically, more so the Colts front four or front seven. And I do think that Tank Dell will have his weeks, but Stephon Diggs caught all 6 of his targets for 33 yards. If he didn't get those 2 touchdowns, this is a bad week for Stephon Diggs. I'm trading him immediately. I'm holding faith in Anthony Richardson. And Lee, go ahead with your rebuttal.
So I've tried to trade Stephon Diggs, but only because I'm very deep at receiver in that league. Okay, so those are short targets, so yardage wise, and we know touchdowns are a little unpredictable. But when you're the first read in the red zone consistently, that makes those short targets a lot more valuable. Anthony Richardson would be my main takeaway. If I have him, and again, that you're right, Dan, that was a great fantasy performance. I don't want to rely on him all year. I have him on a couple teams. I'm exploring some trade options. 9 of 19 is not going to get it done in the NFL. That run that was so amazing, it was an amazing run. He dropped his shoulder and bowled over 2 guys.
Yeah.
That's the type of run that will get him back on the
They get
IR.
him injured. I know, but it was the 4th quarter. It's like they had to have those points. They went
I
for it on
love to
4th.
see it, but I don't love to see it because again, you're coming off injury. You're the most important player to your team. It's a catch-22. It's a
I get what
catch-22.
you're saying too. And like if that was the 1st quarter, I mean, even then, it was the 4th. They went for it on 4th down. Like they decided to try to get the touchdown then, and then go for the field goal to win the game if they got the onside kick. So if it was 3rd down in the 1st quarter, then I get it. Like maybe avoid that hit, but it's the 4th quarter. You have to get it. If you don't get it, you lose the game. And he got it. It's like I will take the upside and hope that he doesn't get injured. I get that he injured the shoulder twice last year, and that's worrisome. But if this guy doesn't get injured, he is going to return on fantasy value 100%.
Again, he had the 2 big passes, and that one was beautiful. There's no doubt. But if he doesn't become a more accurate passer in a hurry, defensive coordinators, he doesn't have a lot of game tape. There's not a lot to study. He was a very inaccurate passer in college. You are not going to have a long NFL career completing less than 50% of your passes. I don't care how athletic you are. You're just not going to have a long career. And they need to run the ball more. We were disappointed in Jonathan Taylor. Anybody that drafted him where you did, you were disappointed in Jonathan Taylor. You weren't disappointed in Anthony Richardson. But as defensive coordinators get more tape on him, if he can't become more accurate with the short to intermediate passes, this Colts team is going to struggle.
Really quick. So then, do you believe in Shane Steichen as an offensive coordinator? Because I do believe in him, and I think he will adjust the game plan when needed. And I do think that it's not like Anthony Richardson is so atrocious on these intermediate passes that he can't get it done. It's just like right now, the game plan called for deep passes. Even though Anthony Richardson had 19 attempts on the day, he had the 7th most attempts of 20 plus yards in the league in week 1. Like that is clearly a part of the game plan, especially given that every quarterback ahead of him had at least 29 attempts. So everyone had 10 or more attempts than him down on the game, and then he throws at least the 7th most attempts and end up having the 3rd most yards on those attempts. He did it while slipping off center. He threw it while getting hit and still completed a bomb. he's got guys that will get that done too. Like Alec Pierce is a downfield threat. AD Mitchell is a downfield threat. I almost missed the time mark here. All right. If you guys are there in Atlanta listening to the show, we appreciate you guys. Make sure to tune into the YouTube. Check us out. We got more to talk about right now. If you want to hear some more week 1 recap. All right, Lee, what were you going to say?
So, yeah, again, and I know, I mean, that's kind of the rep already. So, a little disappointed in the Houston secondary for giving those up. But if you're a defensive coordinator and you're game planning for Anthony Richardson, you try to take away the deep ball, and you try to take away the run. You give him the short intermediate stuff, and you make him throw the ball 30 times a game and complete 20 of 30 to beat. Make him complete those intermediate passes. And I know we didn't see it in this game. You know, there was only one, and I didn't see the interception. I'll be honest. I don't know if it was a good interception. If it wasn't on him, I don't know. But if you take away the deep ball, you form, you know, a contained defense. You have your ends not rushing, but keeping him in the pocket, and you make him throw the ball 30 times a game. He's going to throw at least 2 interceptions a game. One of them is going to be really bad. And again, they're not giving up on him anytime soon. This is the 5th game we've seen him playing, the 3rd complete game. But beyond the injury, he's just got to improve so much leaps and bounds about being able to deliver those short intermediate passes to really have a long career. I think dynasty-wise, he's a sell-high asset off of any big game. I'd be looking to – people are going to pay for him because we know any sharp fantasy manager knows that the rushing is a cheat code. Even in a 6-point league, definitely in a 4-point. But I just don't see a long-term future yet. And I just need to see a lot of improvement in his throwing accuracy before I can.
Yeah, I mean, the throwing worries, you know, I'm definitely worried about his throwing ability. I think this year, though, this game showed that he's going to do kind of that he's able to, you know, do what we were wanting him to do. The rushing upside's still definitely there. I believe it was 56 yards and 1 rushing touchdown is what he got. I mean, that's kind of performance we want on the ground from a quarterback that adds a lot of fantasy production. But like you guys were saying, if it wasn't for those 2 deep balls, it's not a great game for him.
Well, it's an awful game. It's not. It's beyond not a great. It's not. It's awful without those 2 deep balls.
I mean,
those deep balls were beautiful. They weren't like lucky throws. They were like gorgeous.
He missed Adonai Mitchell on a couple as well, though.
He did miss 2 on Adonai Mitchell.
Yeah.
But when you're going to take those many deep shots, like that's going to happen from time to time. They're not high percentage throws. Even, you know, Patrick Mahomes doesn't have a high completion percentage downfield. Really, the only person who does is Brock Purdy.
My guy. But I mean, only throwing the ball 19 times, that's a little interesting. You know, that's very low volume for how close of a game it was. You know, a very competitive game. If that improves, you know, we still didn't get to see a ton of it. 19 passes isn't much to tell. Only completing 9 is bad, but we still have to wait and see. But it's definitely something I'm going to be watching next week as well. More about his arm for, you know, if he still struggles passing the ball, what his real long-term value will be after this season.
Yeah. And then just really quickly, I'll end it here, but when you throw deep bombs like that and you score off of them, like Pierce a 60-yard touchdown and Doolin a 54-yard touchdown, that means that ends the drive. You don't get any more pass attempts. So when you're a guy like Bo Nix, you know, where it's dinking and dunking, like you're going to have more pass attempts because it takes your drive longer to get down the field. So, you know, like one is a causation of the other. But either way, it'll be very fun to keep an eye on Anthony Richardson, especially with our varying takes on him. Let's move on, though, to another. It was, I thought, going to be the biggest shootout of the week. It ended up being a 20-17 game. Miami won this over Jacksonville. It was an interesting game. I will say that, you know, like Waddle looked incredible at times. He got injured for a short stint. Tyreek Hill had a big big day with that one catch there. Just made a couple guys miss and waltzes into the end zone. Heading into next week, Mostert's already ruled out. Achane is a game time decision. Achane had a solid day through the passing game, but both Achane and Mostert were very inefficient on the ground. Jeff Wilson was actually the most efficient running back by a long shot on this team in week one. Curious to hear what your guys' biggest takeaways are. And since we're past the hour mark and we got more games to cover, let's keep it very brief here.
I'll go real brief. Tyreek Hill, the best offensive weapon in the NFL at 30 years old, and there's nobody in contention for it.
Like it, Mason?
My big thing is Tank Bigsby getting 12 carries. ETN also got 12 carries. That's they might have the team might have finally got trust in Bigsby. There's always been talks that they've wanted to pair someone up with ETN. Bigsby might have improved a lot in the offseason. 12 carries, 73 yards. It's pretty efficient.
That was my biggest one as well. Bigsby's he was inefficient last year, but he also fumbled a ton in key moments. That's going to get you off the field. 6.1 yards per attempt for Bigsby compared to Etienne's 3.7 per carry. The touchdown bailed them out of this one for your fantasy value, but I do think that Bigsby's worth a look. Only other thing I will say is that realistically, I think Brian Thomas is going to overtake Gabe Davis as the wide receiver one in terms of snaps. Gabe Davis 94%, Brian Thomas 77%, Christian Kirk 72%. So I think Brian Thomas overtakes Gabe Davis by the end of the season, ends up being a very valuable fantasy asset. We'll move on to the Carolina.
Christian Kirk broke my heart with such a poor performance. Only one reception for 30 yards.
He did the same thing last year. I wasn't even going to bring it up, but since we're talking about it really quickly, Christian Kirk last year had an atrocious week one. Yeah, this year he caught 1 of 4 targets for 30 yards. Last year he caught 1 of 3 targets for 9 yards. After that, he had 2 games. He had 2 of 10 games where he finished under 10 fantasy points in half PPR leagues. And he's a PPR guy. Moving on to the next one, though, we got Carolina at New Orleans. Honestly, I'm going to share this really quick. If you're on YouTube, you can see my notes here for this game. On the Carolina side, I just said no. No. All of this is bad. Don't put your faith in anybody on this team. I do think that eventually they will improve. However, I don't think and there's not a single player to start right now, even if they have a favorable matchup in week 2. They're going up against the Chargers, I believe. Let me check. Yep, Chargers. Eventually, I think Deontay Johnson will be startable, but right now, don't start anybody on that team. That's my take.
Yeah, Lee? I mean,
Mason?
My take, just Panthers still look bad. There wasn't much improvement. I mean, Saints honestly looked really good. It wasn't just the Panthers looked bad. That offense just looked very efficient in every way. Jamal Williams actually got a good amount of touches. Wasn't super efficient. Got a touchdown though, so that's pretty cool. Good for him. Also, that could have been part of them absolutely destroying the team. So they're going to give Kamara a little rest. Olave had a very disappointing day. No receivers really did anything. It was more tight ends kind of helping out. Receivers getting a lot of running backs getting a lot of the receiving work. Shaheed getting a big play. Don't panic about any of those guys. That's kind of my big take. The game plan was not in favor to take these deep shots down the field to Olave. So that's not going to be normal for the Saints. Saints aren't going to be dominating teams like this on a consistent basis. So don't panic about Olave is my kind of big takeaway.
Lee?
Yeah. So Chuba Hubbard is nowhere close to what we thought he would be. And I know we talked about it in our start sit last week, and I mentioned Miles Sanders. Again, not to toot my own horn, but toot. he's not startable. I don't know if he's rosterable. I mean, you got to hold Jonathan Brooks. Hopefully, if you drafted him, you read up on the league and you knew you had an IR spot. Bryce Young does not look like an NFL quarterback. It is amplified by how great C.J. Stroud looks. David Tepper is the worst owner in the NFL. And at some point, you've got a leash. And I think most people would agree if it doesn't improve at all throughout this season, they're probably drafting a quarterback with a top 3 pick. And Bryce Young is going to be on the Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield route, which can work out. We've seen. But he's not – if he makes it in the NFL, it's not going to be with the Panthers. At some point, does it do you any good to have a hamstring injury on the injury report and start Andy Dalton for a week or two and have Bryce Young stand beside his coach? I don't know if it does. I don't know if he can make the throws. He made the throws. He was smart and accurate in college, and that's what got him drafted 101. And that is the biggest thing that scares me with him. It's not like the game is too fast. It's not like, he was running in college and he can't do it in the NFL. He just is missing open receivers.
Yeah.
And at some point, is it just that his team was so much better than everybody else in college that not having that advantage he just isn't going to work out? It doesn't make sense. If you watched him in college, there's a reason he went 101 in most Superflex Dynasty drafts over C.J. Stroud. The guy put it on the dot. He threw with anticipation. He was very accurate. And I just don't know. Did they break him last year? I don't know. I'm not quite ready to give up on him. But to me, there needs to be some drastic changes in Carolina. We know Dave Canales has done it with other quarterbacks. Let's see what happens. But to me, you're not going anywhere this year. I'd consider having a hamstring hold him out a week or two and try. You've got to restore his confidence. Did anybody see the post-game press conference? That man looked defeated. He looked defeated. I've never seen – I can't think of one press conference I've seen from a starting quarterback in the NFL that just was so sad. Like, it made me sad to watch it, and I'm no Carolina fan.
Yeah. No, that's the thing, too. Like, I mean, we all talked about it. Dave Canales has worked his magic on Geno Smith, on Baker Mayfield in the past 2 years. Maybe he could do it with Bryce Young. And I completely agree with you, Lee. I feel bad because, like, even though my friends are in my, like, dynasty leagues and stuff, there's a couple who don't know what's going on. And one of them is like, yo, what do you think about Bryce Young? I was like, honestly, he throws with anticipation. He's mobile enough to extend plays. He doesn't have a great arm by any means, but he can make the throws on an NFL field for the most part. And he needed a quarterback. I told him to go and get Bryce Young, and he did. I ended up stealing C.J. Stroud. It was at 107, I believe it was, in the rookie draft that year. And now I just feel like maybe he thinks I was like working him, yeah, go get this schmuck right here while I go get the, next MVP. But Anthony, if you're out there, I was telling you the truth at the time.
Never trust Dan Baker again, Anthony.
That's what it is. I'm just a scumbag. That's what it is. But yeah, no, I think that Bryce Young shouldn't be fully given up on. Don't sell him cheap if you roster him in Dynasty, but also don't go try to buy him cheap if you don't have him, because it's looked bad enough to not try to buy even at a cheap price, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd trade Jacoby Brissett for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, I would. I'm with you there. All right, so this one should be quick.
I got a quick thing. I'm not ready to give up on Bryce Young yet, but like, quick question: like next week, would you be starting, if you had the option? Would you be starting Bryce Young or Gardner Minshew?
Gardner Minshew.
Hands down.
I mean, it just. I don't think there's going to be faith in Bryce Young to start. Like he should not be in your starting roster until he absolutely proves it that he can.
Beyond that, I would start Jacoby Brissett over next week.
Interesting. I wonder who the matchups are here. I know that
Seattle. No, Patriots got Seattle.
that's a
I don't know
solid
who the
matchup
Panthers
for
got.
Jacoby. I know the Panthers play the Chargers at home. So, not a scary team to go up against, but I would still say it's probably more so of a positive running matchup for the Panthers than a passing matchup.
They had tickets. Again, I'm hearing I'm a little ways from Charlotte, but I'm here in North Carolina. They had tickets for $2 to their home opener. You can get into the home opener against the Chargers for $2.
So I was in Pittsburgh over the weekend. I considered going up to Cleveland for the Cowboys and
Cowboys.
Cleveland game. Happy I didn't because that was the ugliest game I've seen in a while from the Browns. But outside of that, the lowest ticket for 500 level seats was $280. So I was like, no, I think we're gonna lose this game. As optimistic of a Browns fan as I am, I knew that was not a great matchup, and I'm not paying $280 to watch us lose from the 500 levels.
Real
All right,
quick, before we move on
yeah.
from this game, Chris Olave, I think we should mention him. It is a little concerning that they
I
score.
did mention Olave.
Yeah, Mason mentioned him a bunch. He was saying keep faith for the most part. It was just like a blowout. Kind of what you were saying, Lee?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, it
Oh,
was a blowout. You can keep the faith, but right now, who would you rather have, Olave or Drake London? And they were drafted about the same spot.
Drake London.
Olave, just because I think the game plan wasn't really in his favor.
I don't know who I'd rather have. I have a lot of both.
You
And I
don't
feel
even get
just
the
true.
deciding vote here. We need a swing vote, Lee. You got to.
If I had to take one, it would be London because of the Michael Penix potential. Who knows? Maybe he comes in and he lights up the league. Um, Derek Carr, he looked good. He looked good, but I just the Panthers are awful. So we'll see how that continues.
Right. It's just like how long is Carr going to be under contract and in the league? 33 years old. Kirk Cousins is old too, but at least they have Penix as the backup already in place. Let's get on to the Minnesota at the Giants. We shouldn't take long on this at all. It was an absolute blowout. Uh, Addison was injured. That was one of the things I noted. He had a 51% snap share. Part of the reason why he was, had a poor performance in week one. And then, Singletary, I think a lot of people, this is my takeaway, is that Singletary was taken later in rounds. I think, especially for people who went with like a hero or zero RB approach. And I don't know if this Giants team is efficient enough to get him into the red zone. I don't think that Singletary is going to score much. I don't know how much he's going to catch through the air with Tyrone Tracy taking the pass catching role. And overall, I just think that Singletary is not going to be worth his even late round draft pick. And then really quick, Wandale, 12 targets. Maybe think about picking him up in full PPR leagues.
Yeah, honestly, my big takeaway is Daniel Jones still sucks. I mean,
Yep.
and another game, like I think I gave a stat about it not that long ago where there's a certain amount of games where he hadn't passed over 200 yards. This is another one to that list. Also, on top of that, throwing 2 touchdowns. And the big thing that we kind of bank off of Daniel Jones is his rushing upside. 6 carries for 15 yards. That's nothing. That doesn't really add much at all. That was kind of my big thing. Daniel Jones is, if you're in Dynasty and can trade him away, I would do everything I possibly can to, but it's going to be hard. I don't know who's going to really take him at this point. I wouldn't be surprised if Drew Lock's coming in pretty soon. But honestly, for how bad he looked, Neighbors and Wandale Robinson did pretty decent. I mean, both a decent amount of targets. Neighbors getting 5 receptions, Robinson getting 6. It's pretty solid. So a little more faith to the wide receivers. It's just Daniel Jones is not going to. It's only PPR. If you're not in PPR, these wide receivers are going to struggle. But these short little catches might do good in PPR leagues.
Yeah. So the Giants suck. I'm not going to spend much time talking about them. They'll probably pound the shit out of Washington this week because they always suck and they always beat the hell out of Washington. So I would expect Daniel Jones. I can't think of the numbers at this time. I did see a stat where since he got his contract, he's thrown more touchdowns to the other team than his own team, which is just inconceivable. But there was at one point, and this was like last year, he was like 4-1, 5-1 against Washington, and like 7-35 or some. I'm just making these numbers up. It was a crazy number against the rest of the league. He dominates Washington. If you're in daily fantasy, and I hate Daniel Jones and he sucks. If you're in daily fantasy and you want to win a big competition, start Daniel Jones this week because he lights up Washington. We have a terrible defense. He is going to look like an NFL quarterback this week. But I'm going to move. My point is going to be more on the Vikings. So Sam Darnold looked like an NFL quarterback. We don't know. We didn't see a lot from this vaunted. The Giants' pass rush is supposed to be the strength of their team. Kayvon Thibodeau, bringing in Brian Burns. They didn't get pressure on Darnold much. They looked horrible. I don't know what Sam Darnold's going to be for the rest of the year. Aaron Jones, if he's healthy, is going to be a thing. Aaron Jones looked as good as he's looked in the last 3 seasons. Was it 6.7 yards a carry, 14 for 94. He added 2 catches for 15 yards. Aaron Jones looked healthy, and he looked as explosive as he has in some time. That's a guy that you're not going to be able to trade for him. But if you drafted him, if you went out on that limb, you can feel confident he's an RB1 until further notice.
Just so quickly, Ty Chandler also had 8 carries, just 17 yards. He's also an explosive guy, also a pass catcher, not nearly as efficient as Aaron Jones was. And Aaron Jones finished strong last season when he returned to health. So I agree with that fully. Let's get on to our next team here. It was the Raiders against the Chargers. Chargers take this one pretty handily, 22-10. Raiders had jumped up to a 7-0 lead, but after the second half, it was all Chargers for the most part. Biggest takeaway, real quick, Alexander Mattison, 60% of snaps. Zamir White, 38%. Alexander Mattison gets all of the passing work, and there is not another running back that really was worth a damn. So I think that Mattison is worth rostering. I would not start him quite yet, but I think he is worth taking a shot on in case this ends up being the play. Don't think he'll be efficient, but if he ends up getting the volume, he could be worth rostering. What do you guys got here on this one?
Yeah, I just want to add on to that real quick. Zamir White did get as much snap percentage, but he did get more touches as far as carries, that is, at least. But my big takeaway is J.K. Dobbins. 135 yards, 10 carries, 1 touchdown. So getting a little receiving work. If you're in a PPR league, 3 receptions for 4 yards. Surprising everybody. I mean, Gus Edwards got 11 carries. J.K. Dobbins only getting 1, but looking a ton more efficient. He made it past week 1. It's good to see that. It's been a while. And just the way this offense was kind of working, Herbert only throwing it 26 times, and it being the Harbaugh we know, I think there's going to be a lot more running to go forward for J.K. Dobbins. He's might be available in some redraft leagues. If he is, pick him up as soon as you can. He's going to be hard to trade for at this point. But, I think because next week they play the Panthers, J.K. Dobbins might be a steal of a start on week 2. I just like that going forward. That's really what I took away, that J.K. Dobbins might be a very good start for the first opening couple weeks.
Yeah, one, he's not available. If he's available after the waivers ran on Tuesday, you are playing in a league that is asleep at the wheel. After that,
81% rostered in sleeper leagues.
Only 81?
81% roster. That's still – and
that's
there's
number,
so many leagues. I hear you. It's just there's so many leagues out there where it's like very casual fans that are not doing the most on week 1. 81% means he's probably rostered in your league,
Yeah.
worth a shot checking, but
I mean,
continually.
15% of those are dead leagues. Got to be.
Right. But yeah.
So,
Yeah, go
just
ahead.
real quick, I don't have a ton to say about this game. I did watch a little bit of it. It was not an exciting game, and there was a lot of doubt about Justin Herbert coming into the year. It was justified. As Mason said, they are going to run the ball a lot. Their defense, again, not playing a great offense, but their defense, specifically their run defense, they gave up 3.2 yards a carry, 22 carries for 71 yards against a Raiders offense that we knew was going to try to run the ball.
Yep.
That is not. I don't want all my eggs in the Justin Herbert basket this year. I like his long-term value, and if I'm in Dynasty, I don't mind trying to trade for him long term if I'm not trying to win a championship this year. He's not going to win you a championship this year. This is going to be a heavy run team. The wide receiver room is, I mean, I was encouraged that Ladd McConkey, he did get the 7 targets. Without that touchdown, that's a pretty ho-hum game. But he seems like, we don't know. Josh Palmer got ejected. He went nuts in the end zone. There was a huge fight. Josh Palmer looked like the wide receiver one. He was getting that attention from the Raiders defense before he went out, but we don't know. But I'm not comfortable starting any of those wide receivers for the foreseeable future. Gus Edwards is a concern, but I'm not out on Gus Edwards. He had one more carry than J.K. did. Obviously, 13.5 yards a carry versus 2.4. So we'll see how this breaks out. But if you're a Gus Edwards owner, I'm not dropping him. I still think he's going to get a ton of goal line work. This is going to be a team that utilizes 2 running backs. I'm a little surprised there wasn't more carries between those two, and there's nobody else in the Chargers offense I want to start.
Right. It was a pretty neutral game script for the most part. Those were the only 2 running backs to get carries. Gus Edward had 42% of the snaps. JK ended up having 58% of the snaps. Nobody else got any touches on this team. So I agree with you. Gus Edwards is still worth rostering in very clear, like even next week. Personally, I would start Gus Edwards over J.K. Dobbins. The Chargers offensive line is nice. The Raiders defensive line is also nice. If Gus Edwards and JK both break through a hole, JK is going to make more of that. And even with that, we saw him, likely because he's coming off of an Achilles injury and his second or third detrimental kind of injury in his career. He wasn't able to finish off that second long run. I think it was 60 yards for the touchdown. 61 yards. Yeah. So he wasn't able to finish it off, but I do think that he is worth rostering, of course. And then Gus Edwards will get the goal line work inside of the 10-yard line. And I think that will be, especially with how their defense is looking, more often than maybe we thought at the beginning of the season.
Early
All
favorite,
right.
just to finish up, early favorite for comeback player of the year. You love to see it. I hope this continues all season. You don't want to see a young kid who had so much potential get washed out of the league because of injuries. And I have more Gus Edwards than J.K. Dobbins, so this is not a personal. I want my teams to do better.
Right.
He's a guy who's experienced so much adversity in his career. I really hope this continues.
Yeah. And I mean, youth is on JK's side. He's still only 25 years old, which is insane. He feels like he's like 28 years old, but he's 25 right now, 4 years in the league. Unfortunate injury history, but we're moving on to Denver at Seattle. Seattle took this game 26-20. Bo Nix did not look like his preseason version of himself. Jaleel McLaughlin, more involved than I think most people gave him credit to. And then on top of it, report came out today that Audric Estime is going on the injured reserve list with a ankle injury. So he's Jaleel McLaughlin is going to continue to be involved. They got rid of Samaje Perine. He ends up going to the Chiefs. Right now, it's just Devontae and Jaleel for the most part. The wide receivers are going to be a little bit tough to decipher on the Broncos. Sutton had the most snaps, but he's not necessarily the play style that Bo Nix is the most adept to. Devon Vel, I'm still
Ville,
not
Ville.
Ville, not even
I
one
don't
of the
know.
two that I said. Oh, no,
I don't know,
you
but I
got me.
feel like
I was
it's
like,
Ville.
I'll take it for what it is. But no, he honestly is, I think, one of the deep sleeper options at wide receiver that is probably still available in your league, even post waiver wire run. Right now in sleeper, he is available. He's definitely available. He's rostered in 8% of leagues as a rookie, albeit a 26-year-old rookie. Looked very solid in his first game. Caught all 8 of his 8 targets, only for 39 yards. However, the man 6'5", 210 pounds. He's likely to be one of the red zone threats along with Courtland Sutton. I like picking him up in leagues that are a little bit deeper, taking a shot on a guy that can continue to improve. And then really quick, on the Seattle side of the ball, we talked about it before. JSN outsnapped Tyler Lockett 79% to 54%. However, Lockett outscores him by a bunch, and Kenneth Walker, clear lead back over Charbonnet. However, this is another situation where it was just 2 running backs. There's going to be some value in Charbonnet. They used him a bit in the passing game. I do believe that he could be used a little bit more in the red zone. But Walker outsnaps him 66 to 34. I think that Walker was a great value pick, but Charbonnet shouldn't be discounted.
And Walker didn't practice. He did not practice today with the oblique.
I didn't see that.
You're
Mason?
muted again, Mason.
Charbonnet really only got as much use as he did because Walker left the game early. There's a chance that Walker does not play this week. If that's the case, Charbonnet is a good pickup. He's only rostered in 58% of leagues and sleeper up for redraft right now. If Walker's out, he's a great start. But, maybe even if Walker is playing, they might limit him a little more. But I think once Walker's back to full health, he's going to be a true workhorse. He was showing it for a majority of the game until he went out. He was looking good. Put up a good week 1. I'm still not trusting Charbonnet in any world where Walker is 100%. But for right now, he's an intriguing pickup in case Walker is out.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree because of the injury concern. And I mean, he did have, a couple of big plays. He had the 30-yard catch. He scored the touchdown receiving. He had 8 carries and had 1.5 yards a carry. It is very clear that Kenneth Walker is head and shoulders the better NFL running back. And Charbonnet is a guy, if Walker's healthy, I don't want him taking a roster spot. I know a lot of people loved him pre-draft, but he hasn't shown it at the NFL level. And maybe, obviously he's at least an RB2 if Walker's out, but he kind of feels like a guy to me against that Patriots defense that looked pretty solid last week, that you start him and he's going to hurt your feelings. I certainly wouldn't even consider if Walker's playing. But for me, and as a Carolina guy, this is sad. But I'm ready to toll the bell on Javonte Williams. I don't think he will ever get back to his pre-injury self. I did not know that about Audric Estime. And to me, that just jolts Jaleel McLaughlin even higher up my list. I have him on a lot of the end of my benches. I think he's a guy, as the season goes on, he's going to get more and more work. Javonte Williams, he looks like a lumberer who has no burst, and he just I don't know. He's not going to get a second contract with Denver. He might catch on as a backup. If you're in Dynasty and you can get any value at all for him, you trade him now.
Yeah. Jaleel is he ended up getting 15 opportunities compared to Javonte's 10 opportunities, even in week 1. They're only a year apart, and Jaleel does have the burst. So I think he's worth the shot in a system where Sean Payton has always valued his running backs. Let's move on to my least favorite topic of the day. Dallas against Cleveland. Fuck me, bud. That was the worst game I've watched Cleveland play potentially, I would say at least in the last 3 years. Everything was terrible across the board. Hard to even evaluate too much from this. Really, my only takeaway on the Cleveland side of the ball was that Jerome Ford is going to be a startable option again while Nick Chubb is out. He had a respectable day. He's never really going to win you a week, but he's going to offer you some baseline if you are, missing out on a running back and need a guy to start, or you just want to throw him in your flex. Usually a reliable 10 to 12 points at the bare minimum. On the other side of the ball, CeeDee Lamb continues to be that dude. Jake Ferguson was going to be the second target for a while, but with him out, I would say Brandon Cooks is flexible until Ferguson returns. Those are my takeaways.
Yeah, my takeaway from the game is that there's not really an established running back in the Dallas backfield from what we really know after week one. Zeke did look a lot better, though. 10 carries, 40 yards. 4 yards per carry was more efficient than Dowdle. 8 carries, 26 yards, so a little over 3 yards a carry. Zeke got 2 receptions. Dowdle got 1. Zeke also got a touchdown from 3 yards out. So it looks like he will be the red zone back. That gives him, I think, a lot more value. As far as the workload goes, I'm not sure, but Zeke definitely will be looking like he's going to be the one scoring those red zone touchdowns for the backfield, which I think makes him an interesting RB3 moving forward. Then my other take is Deshaun Watson sucks. Still can't pass.
So hard.
At all. 45 passing attempts, and you end up with 169 yards, 2 interceptions. That is just, it's not what you want from your quarterback. Sell him if you can. It might be really hard to at this point, but if you're in Dynasty, get rid of him for whatever you can at this point. I think there's a potential that, the contract situation is a little tough, but I think there's a chance this could really be his last year as a starter.
Just to touch on what you said there, Mason, I just put it as big as I could. My note for Deshaun Watson is a bum and he's a creep. So, I didn't share it. Lovely. Watson is a bum. He's a creep. I want to move on. Put Jameson Winston in there. Give me anything other than Watson. Lee, what was your takeaway?
So one, Alexandria, we appreciate you watching and commenting. I do want you to know, Watson is a bum. You're right. I do want you to know this is a very anti-Cowboys podcast, but we appreciate you, and we will try to limit our anti-Cowboy-ism. So Mason stole it a little bit from me.
Alex, get out of here. That's my girlfriend.
No, Alex. Tell your friends to come in. So Deshaun Watson is done. It's the worst trade and contract in NFL history. Yep. It's not close.
3 first rounders, second and a third.
And Baker, what makes it so much worse for you as a Cleveland fan and the fan base as a whole is Baker Mayfield. And we're about to talk about this in the next game, and it was all over my face. But Baker Mayfield looks like
that guy? Him?
I even hate to say this because Mason is, we know, I don't know, he's got random fanhood everywhere. And our defense is horrible, but we'll get there. He looks like a legit top 15 quarterback that you had already drafted, that you would not have had to give up $240 million, and you certainly wouldn't have to give up 3 more first-round picks. I mean, wow. Yeah. Wow. It's so bad. At what point do we see Jameis Winston for fantasy purposes? And I know Njoku's hurt. Cooper get banged up too?
I think he's going to be good to go. He'll be fine to go in week 2.
For that purpose, and we all know Jameis is a really good fantasy quarterback. He'll spray the damn ball. When do we see Jameis Winston? Because at some point, you have a great defense. It didn't show last week, but you have a great defense. You were going against a really good offense. Things sometimes in the NFL, games just snowball. This game snowballed quickly. What point do we see Jameis Winston, and how quickly can the Browns get out of Deshaun Watson's contract? That's the takeaway.
I will answer the contract question. I'll move on to the next one while I do that. And then we
Remember that
move
the
on.
Broncos ate $35 million this year to get rid of Russell Wilson, and he looked like Tom Brady or Joe Montana compared to Deshaun Watson.
Joe Montana?
Joe Montana, left tackle, right outside linebacker.
Yeah, no, it is infuriating that, we get rid of Baker Mayfield after a season where he had multiple injuries, including an injury to his throwing shoulder. And we're like, thank you for gritting out all those games. Please fuck off. And, bring in Predator. And he destroys our team. And alleged Predator. But
Now there's another charge. There's more allegations.
it came out again. That's the thing. But like legally, I have to say that because he's got probably he has a much better lawyer than I do. So allegedly, Deshaun is the predator, but he is proven to be a shitty NFL quarterback. That's for damn sure. We're moving on to your team, Lee. We got Washington at Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay takes this one 37-20. Really quick, my takeaway. I got Baker Mayfield, dog, all caps. He's a dog. He's got the weapons. McMillan. He looked good. He was on the field a ton. He had an 83% snap share, which was actually 5% more than Chris Godwin and 13% more than Mike Evans. Only got the one reception, happened to be for a 30-yard tutter. But I like McMillan moving forward. I don't think you have to roster him right now. Keep your eye on him. I think he could continue to have success. Other two notes are Jaden Daniels, fantasy stud. Those legs are going to carry you to where you need to go. Kind of like a knockoff Anthony Richardson, just a little bit less bulk there. And then
knockoff Anthony Richardson. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
He is not a dude. The game plan was let's throw screen passes and little dump offs, and then if you don't have the screen, then run. At least Anthony Richardson's taking shots downfield. Like I'd rather have Richardson for sure than Daniels. However, the legs are what gets it done. It's the cheat code, man. Like Daniels is going to get it done through the running game. My big takeaway, though, the biggest of them all, Terry McLaurin, big old oof. That hurt in week one. That was a nice, easy matchup where at least in the front half, I thought that they were going to be able to take care of business, get the job done for him. He had a terrible game. On a lot of my rosters, as he was a great value pick, in my opinion. I'm not losing faith in him in the season, but I am worried about McLaurin moving forward.
I must respond. A knockoff Anthony Richardson.
Yes.
They are running quarterbacks. That is the only similarity. Jaden Daniels.
Do they like to throw the ball deep?
He didn't last week, but here's the difference. Jaden Daniels has been an extremely accurate passer. He was an extremely accurate passer, not with just downfield, but short, intermediate. He went 17 of 24. Now, a lot of that was short stuff. You mentioned Terry McLaurin. He missed Terry McLaurin on what would have been a 60-yard touchdown. McLaurin had 3 steps on his defender. That was the only shot they let him take. I don't know if I trust Cliff Kingsbury as offensive coordinator. After one game, I'm going to say I don't know if I trust him. I've been optimistic, but I don't know if I trust him. I did not like the game plan. They definitely – I don't know if anybody saw the first play. That was the most inaccurate – beyond the Terry miss, because that's a deep pass. The first play of the game, they throw a screen swing pass to Brian Robinson. That was the worst pass of Jaden Daniels' game. He threw it 2 yards over his head. The ball just bounced 8 yards back, and we're at 2nd and 18 on the first drive. So they have to open up the offense. The intermediate passing game was not there. The deep passing game was not there. A lot of his passing numbers were garbage time. I don't want to hear that he doesn't have weapons. Terry McLaurin is a legitimate top 20 wide receiver. Austin Eckler showed he still had some pop as a pass-catching running back, who is clearly, as I've been telling anybody that's been listening, is clearly the running back too. And Brian Robinson is that guy for this offense. But here's the thing. Jaden Daniels didn't look uncomfortable. He didn't make any of the terrible plays that Caleb Williams, Will Levis, some of the other really young quarterbacks made. The play calling severely limited him. The Bucks rushed at least 5 pass rushers more than any other team did Sunday. And we don't have a great offensive line. Our rookie left tackle was rotating in. He will be starting next week, and I like that potential. He needs to learn how to slide. Jaden Daniels is a league winner. You drafted him 6 rounds behind Anthony Richardson, and he's going to deliver similar numbers, much more accurate passing. He's not going to hit maybe not quite as many deep balls, specifically if Cliff Kingsbury doesn't let him throw the ball deep or doesn't call those plays. But he is that guy for now. I don't want to get too excited. I was in a game where we got Washington. Sorry, listeners. Washington got completely annihilated. Unlike Browns fans, not to take a shot at you, Dan, but there's hope.
Oh, it was a shot. It was intentional.
There's hope for the future of the position, and really, my biggest takeaway is Baker Mayfield missed 2 more touchdowns on the first 2 drives. They kicked field goals because they missed wide open receivers. If you have any players, including certainly you're starting Malik Neighbors against the Washington secondary. Devin Singletary as well, probably Wan'Dale Robinson. And if you are desperate and you're in a super flex league, I'm telling you, as crazy as this sounds, Daniel Jones is a start for this week. And I don't know the schedule offhand, but whatever the other week, if he's still playing, whenever they play Washington again, this is going to be the worst defense in the NFL. And because of that, they are going to open up the passing game. Jaden Daniels will finish as a top 10 quarterback, and he is going to deliver where he was drafted. And I pray to God he learns how to slide and doesn't get his head ripped off. Because that's the worst looking slide, dive, barrel roll I've ever seen in my life.
So real quick, just to give the rebuttal here. Would you trade in a redraft league Jaden Daniels for Anthony Richardson post-draft? I get the values vastly different, but would you take Anthony Richardson if you're a Jaden Daniels manager?
If it's straight up,
redraft 1 year. I know
because of how concerned I am with the play calling, I probably would.
Right. But, and that's all I'm saying by knockoff. I'm not discounting Jaden Daniels. I think he's immensely valuable. He was the QB3, was it this week? That's really valuable. The fact that he was in this scenario, did not throw the ball downfield, and still ends up being the QB3 is very valuable. However, Anthony Richardson has better talent around him. The wide receiver 2, the wide receiver 3 on the team are much better than Luke McCaffrey, Diami Brown, or if you choose Alameda Zacchaeus. He just has better talent surrounding him. He's a bigger guy that is more likely to get some of those. If Jaden Daniels in the fourth quarter on that last drive, 4th and goal, tries to plow over those linebackers that are trying to stop Anthony Richardson, he goes down. He definitely goes down. He doesn't score that touchdown. That's basically all I'm saying for the most part. And then the last part is I brought it up earlier when talking about Anthony Richardson. I trust in Shane Steichen. He very much made Jalen Hurts the quarterback that he is. Jalen Hurts is very talented, and more so, Jalen Hurts made Jalen Hurts who he is. But Steichen was a big part of that offense and had them running at top-end efficiency, whereas Cliff Kingsbury's never been that guy. He's a very boring play caller, and it took him a full year to understand that the college West Coast offense isn't going to work here. So I really do believe in Anthony Richardson more so. However, it's not taking away from Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels was, I think I said it in the preseason. He is my favorite pick. He would have been my guy, quote unquote, whatever you want to call it. But like he was my favorite value pick in the draft and my most rostered player. So not taking anything away from him. Really like Jaden Daniels, but I think that Anthony Richardson is still better.
I would probably honestly go with Richardson, just because I think that the Colts are going to be scoring a lot more touchdowns in general this year than the Commanders are going to. I think Daniels could put up better stats, at least in the throwing department. But I just think the touchdowns are going to be what I would definitely take Richardson for. But my big thing, you guys just pretty much talking about Washington. Obviously, I got to give credit where it's due to my man Baker Mayfield,
We
going
love
off
Baker.
289 yards, 4 touchdowns. I mean, come on, it's Baker. It's time to bake season. But what really I think I'm going to take from it is Bucky Irvin getting 9 carries for 62 yards, looking really solid. Also adding in 2 receptions for 14 yards. It's only 6 less carries than Rashad White. Irvin was only on the field for, I believe, 31% of snaps. But when he looked good, took advantage of his opportunities. That's how you work yourself into a stronger role in the game plan. I think he's an interesting guy to maybe pick up if you got a spot, if he's available in your redraft league. He's currently only rostered about 35%. I like him a lot. I think he's an interesting target for if you have the depth to where you can stash a running back for a week or two before really maybe seeing if you want to play him. I think he's an interesting target.
Yeah, I like that. Let's get on to the next game here. We got the Rams against Detroit. It was a fun game headed into overtime. Montgomery seals the win with a touchdown, 26-20 in favor of Detroit. We did see Puka Nacua go down to an injury, very worrisome for a lot of managers out there. One of my biggest takeaways, though, and this sounds dumb, but Jameson Williams is fast, bro. He's so fast. Like even when you just rewatch any of these clips, like he started off on this slant route far behind the defense. And then he still almost beat the last defender. There's 3 or 4 guys that had an angle on him, and he still almost beat the last defender in terms it's like I drafted Jameson Williams in my rookie draft. I loved him. I loved the tape. I love that he went to Ohio, was not going to beat out the rest of the very talented wide receivers there. So he was forced to work on his route running to become a better wide receiver, and then goes to Alabama, has all the success, goes into the NFL, drafted to a team that values the run game. And if you can't run block, you're not on the field. So he wasn't on the field. I traded him away after 2 years, even with the faith that I had in him. And I really wish that I did not, because he's going to be a splashy boomer bust guy, but when he pops, he's going to pop. He is a tall, talented wide receiver. That was my biggest takeaway personally. It's just that Jameson Williams is a massive buy. It's not even.
Not
I
now.
can't
You're
say
not buying them low now.
right. Don't do it right now. But Jameson Williams is worth trading for in dynasty. And then on the Rams side of the ball, Kyron, workhorse, Cooper Kupp, 21 targets. Are you kidding me? I know there's the Nakua injury, but regardless, that is a insane workload for a guy that a lot of people had question marks on, and a guy that was going in the 3rd or 4th round, depending on your platform. So, oh, and last thing, Colby Parkinson. Come on, guys. You guys all shitted on me.
Toot, toot.
Like, it was
Toot,
like
toot.
5 months ago, and I was talking up Colby Parkinson, and everyone shitted on me. And now look who's like one of the top tight end pickups of the league. So, just saying.
Toot that horn.
Tooting it all the way, fully for Colby Parkinson. All right, what do you guys takeaways here?
My big takeaway is going to be just kind of about the Puka injury. You got sent to the IR, means he's going to miss at least 4 weeks. There's some reports that he might be missing longer than 4 weeks. So right now, throwing him on your IR spot if you have him, you're looking for the replacement. I honestly think it is going to be Demarcus Robinson. He got targeted 7 times last game, only brought in 4 receptions for 42 yards. He was with the team towards the end of last season, did pretty solid. I think they're going to kind of fall back on him a little more. He's only rostered in about I believe it's 32% of sleeper redraft leagues right now, so he's available in a lot. He's a good person to put in for a waiver right now if you can. The Rams threw the ball 49 times. They attempted to throw 49 times. If that keeps up, Demarcus Robinson, as long as Puka's out, should be doing good. That's just really what I took away from the game. That there's some good potential free agents out there on the waiver wire for you to pick up after that Puka injury.
So a couple of things. One, my biggest takeaway from this game is going to be a steaming hot take that we finish the show with. So stay tuned. You may not agree, but I have a really hot take. But what I'll say now, and this goes back to something I said earlier, Kyren Williams didn't look great. The Lions defense, especially the run defense, was good last year. 2.8 yards a carry on 18 carries is not going to get it done. I know it was Ronnie Rivers. Do not drop Blake Corum. If we don't see a huge increase from Kyren Williams, I firmly believe Blake Corum is going to be involved this week against the Cardinals. Kyren Williams is a small guy. His best, we know McVay likes to have a workhorse back. I don't think this is going to be the year-long it's not going to be the year-long game plan that they go with. And we're going to see Blake Corum. And I was going to say it. You already said it, but props to Dan. Props to Dan. Colby Parkinson's a thing. I picked him up this week for free. I got beat on Fab for Isaiah Likely. We talked about this a little bit in private. I bid $41 for Isaiah Likely in a league I have no tight ends. The winning bid, $42. That burns. Dude, that burns.
You want to hear something funny? And that does suck that you were so narrowly outbid. That does suck hard. I think everybody in the world kind of expected Likely was going to be insanely bid on. So in my OG redraft league that's been going on for 14 years or so, Isaiah Likely had 2 bids on him. One of them was $0. The next in our max amount of Fab is 200. And the next person bet 200 on him. So there you go. That I literally didn't bid on him because I had Trey McBride in that league. We've all been talking about it throughout the week. Me and Lee are more so on the side that Likely will have some fantasy value moving forward. I think we both agreed that at the worst, the third target on the team. However, the Ravens were playing against the Chiefs. It's a game where they have to pass a lot. That's not going to be the case moving forward most weeks. It's going to be a lot more run. And maybe if Likely is the third, at best, 2A, 2B target on the team with Zay Flowers, it's not going to pay off in the way that people are going to think after seeing this week 1 performance. So I didn't end up bidding on him. The guy who got it, I could have gotten him. I couldn't have because the guy bet $200. But if that one guy wasn't there, I could have got him for $1. But yeah, I think it's really interesting, case study moving forward, because I am rarely taking a bet on a tight end 2, and regardless of what you think he is still behind Mark Andrews, so he's still a tight end 2. All right. So this brings us to the Monday night game, which was not a lot of fun. Unless you're Mason over here. If you're a San Fran fan, you won that game 32-19 against the Jets, and really it was never in question. That it was a very boring offense from the Jets. I also heard on another podcast that Aaron Rodgers only targeted the left side of the field.
I saw that.
I,
I saw that.
I don't even know what that means for fantasy. Unless it was Garrett Wilson exclusively lining up on one side, or was Allen? I guess maybe Allen Lazard more lining up on the left because he had the most targets in this game. Allen Lazard ends up being a very popular pickup in fantasy leagues. I feel like mostly like homer leagues where they're just looking at Aaron Rodgers and who he has familiarity with. Do you guys, just before we touch on big takeaways from this, do you guys think that Allen Lazard is A, worth rostering, but B, more so, going to finish as a top 36 wide receiver? Is he a wide receiver 3 or better?
I don't think so. Mike Williams was very limited because he wasn't 100% coming into this game. I think definitely once he's more healthy, if he can stay healthy, there's no shot Lazard stays, doing near as what he did. Garrett Wilson, I expect to also take more. There was not a single wide receiver thrown to besides Lazard or Wilson this game, or that at least got a reception. There might have been some that were targeted, but not a single other one got a reception. I don't expect that to continue. There's no way Allen Lazard finishes as a wide receiver 3.
Yeah.
Disagree.
Totally.
Disagree. Aaron Rodgers of all the quarterbacks in the NFL, there is no quarterback that goes to his guys more. And we saw Garrett Wilson get 4 targets, 4 receptions, I think, within the first 2 drives. And then after that, he had 2 receptions after that. He did get quite a few targets, but there's nobody in this offense that Aaron Rodgers trusts more than Allen Lazard. I cautiously say this, but their defense was not what it's been. And we'll see if they can pay Hassan Reddick, get him in there. Obviously, the 49ers were clicking with a backup, undrafted rookie running back who just ran the ball all over them. But if their run defense doesn't get better, if they don't get Hassan Reddick in, they're going to be throwing the ball more. Again, I mean, he only had 21 pass attempts. Obviously, Tyrod Taylor came in and looked pretty good for 8. That's still only 29 pass attempts. I think this might be a team that has to throw the ball more than what we expected coming in. And for some reason, nobody knows what it is. Familiarity may be the biggest thing, but he trusts Allen Lazard. Mike Williams has a long way to go to try to get that kind of trust. Allen Lazard's going to get 6 to 10 targets a game. And just with that kind of volume, especially if he's getting in the red zone, back end, I don't think he's going to be a top 20 or even 25, but I could certainly see him as a back end wide receiver 3 this year.
Okay, a bit of different takes here. I am also more on Mason's side here. I think that as he gains familiarity with Garrett Wilson, they'll learn each other's games. They'll continue to target him more, even though he only had even though he had 11 targets. His 6 receptions went for 60 yards. They were like the basic type of routes, quick slants, quick hitters. Then Garrett Wilson is going to continue to improve on that. On top, like Mason said, Mike Williams insanely limited snap count, 18% of 18% of snaps. And on top of that, Xavier Gibson is 59% of the routes, or I'm sorry, snaps played. There's no way that doesn't flip flop at the bare minimum, and some of those deeper targets go to Mike Williams. We'll see how long Mike Williams lasts. He's consistently injured. The last time he played even 16 games was 2021. So we'll see how that goes. I do like Breece Hall overall as the workhorse back, 82% of snaps compared to 18% for Braylon Allen. I think that's going to work well for him. Same type of vibe. Tyler Conklin, 90% of snaps. Neither had great fantasy days. I do think that Conklin's going to be streamable, and Brees Hall, if it's not likely, but if you can trade for him right now, coming off of a 14-point game, do it while you can. He's going up against Tennessee next week, New England, and Denver, then Minnesota, Buffalo. Like they got a cake schedule for the most part. So go and get him. On the other side of the ball, Brandon Ayuk, limited snap count, only played 60%. They announced that before the game. Debo Samuel worked all over the place. Jordan Mason gets an absolute fuck ton of carries. Looks like he could be an RB1 on another team. However, I feel like that's the Shanahan system. And then Purdy does the normal, takes what's given to him. Did anybody else have anything to add on the other side of the ball here? We mostly talked about the Jets.
Yeah, I just want to say Niners. Purdy obviously had a disappointing performance. Fantasy wise, he looked good. NFL wise, being not ending up with any touchdowns really did end up hurting his fantasy production. Jordan Mason obviously is one of the hottest names in fantasy right now. If McCaffrey sits, he's a definite start. Still, I wouldn't go too crazy in trading for him. I know people are kind of going, giving up a lot more than they probably should right now. Because once McCaffrey's back, I doubt Jordan Mason's really going to have much of a role at all. I'm glad to see that he's finally producing. I've believed in him so much. I'm finally glad that he can get a chance to show that he's got that dog in him. Honestly, with the game, it went great for having all the offseason drama between Ayuk and Trent Williams not really being there, and then having a week and coming out and kicking the crap out of a team that's supposed to have a good defense. Niners are just going to probably continue to improve on their fantasy production with that factored in.
And then really quick, Niners next 5 games, Minnesota, the Rams, Patriots got a good D, but Arizona and Seattle after that. 4 of the next 5 are looking nice for San Fran.
So I couldn't disagree more. I know it's your team, and I know you watch them more than me. There is no way, coming off of the injury at his age, that he has anywhere near the snap percentage that he had last year. Jordan Mason, the way Jordan Mason played, if you want to win a Super Bowl, and I went out on a limb and I called McCaffrey the bust when we talked about busts a few weeks ago. And I gave a lot of reasons why. But the number one was his age and the snap share being completely unsustainable. You do not have a running back 2 that looks as good as Jordan Mason did against a vaunted Jets defense and not let him on the field. I'm not saying he's going to have standalone value if McCaffrey's back. What I'm saying, he is going to eat into enough of the workload that you will not see the Christian McCaffrey that you did for the last season and a half. Jordan Mason will get carries even when Christian McCaffrey is 100%. He will get run. And if he doesn't, Kyle Shanahan is a moron.
It's hard.
He definitely should be getting some touches in, when McCaffrey does come back. Just McCaffrey's this is the most talented running back in the league. That's definitely more, a majority of people would say that. But, being injured already, if Jordan Mason could produce another week, I 100% agree that McCaffrey needs to limit his share and, give Mason an opportunity to come in and really, take a little bit of the tread off the tires of McCaffrey.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, like you guys are saying, Jordan Mason, he has his role. He looks like he can be a bit of a bruiser, especially if that is the role he's designated to. And to your point, Lee, it's hard to say that Christian McCaffrey can reproduce what he's done in the past 2.5 or 1.5 seasons. The guy scores an insane amount of points, 21 touchdowns last year, over 2,000 total yards. Like, can I make a bet that says that he will repeat on that? No, I'm not going to do that. But at the same time, if he does 2/3 of that, he's still a top 3 running back at the bare minimum, if not RB1 without doing the math right now. But I just think overall that Brock Purdy is the safest bet along with Christian McCaffrey. Brandon Ayuk, he's going to get more snaps moving forward. Look for him to have a big game in this next week in a cake matchup. I cannot see him scoring less. I don't think he'll be on the field for less than 80% of the snaps, and compared to the 60% snaps he just saw. And against Minnesota, with no elite cornerback on that team, he's gonna at least get one massive play in this game. So don't be scared off by his week 1 performance. That is just him holding out for a contract. Lee, you teased it earlier though, so I am very interested in hearing what this is. What is this bold take, this overreaction you have in week 1?
This is the overreaction time. You said it. This is where you look at one game and you extrapolate something that doesn't seem likely, but it could happen. You're not going to like this, Mason. By the end of next season, so I'm going to give him a little bit of a runway. So by the end of 2025, Jamison Williams will be valued higher than Amon-Ra St. Brown. He will be the clear number 1 wide receiver for the Detroit Lions. There is nobody close to his explosiveness on the field except Jahmyr Gibbs. Amon-Ra St. Brown will become the underneath possession receiver. He will be the Adam Thielen to Stephon Diggs, who showed he was the true alpha in that wide receiving room. He was drafted ahead of guys who we've seen are extremely talented. He got hurt, and I think it was the last game of the season. I think it was the championship game, or it was very at the end of the Alabama season. He missed the entire year. He was out for 6 games with Gamble. With what he showed, he's bought in completely to Dan Campbell's offense. I wouldn't trade him. It would take a haul. I've held on to him. I drafted him over Garrett Wilson. He will be better than Garrett Wilson. He is going to be a top 12 wide receiver when you draft in 2026, maybe 2025. This is a guy who has unlimited potential, and he takes the top off like nobody else in that offense. He is going to be the vocal point, and Amon-Ra St. Brown will take a backseat.
I don't believe in that.
It's bold. I love it, but it's bold as hell.
I mean, if what Jameson showed, I think it definitely can bring down Amon-Ra a lot. But Amon-Ra in PPR leagues, there's no way he's going to get past. Jared Goff throws to him so often. Obviously this game it didn't really go his way as much, but that there's no way that's going to continue to happen. Amon-Ra is their number 1, and he will be with how much they paid him. Jameson's just going to be there to help move the ball down the field quick, which it should hurt Amon-Ra a little bit, but I'm not worried about it.
Dude, yeah, I
mean, take some of those underneath throws as well. There's nobody else taking the top off and taking the deep throw.
Not right now, but the third wide receiver on the team is Khalif Raymond. So, like, if they go and add somebody that's the field stretcher now and then try to shift Jamison Williams into a slightly different role, maybe an intermediate role. Listen, I agree. I was just telling you, hey, I had Jamison Williams on my dynasty roster for 2 years. Was able to throw him in my taxi squad for one of those. Once I actually had to keep him on my bench and make roster decisions, I was starting to lean away from that. I ended up trading away Jamison Williams, Nick Chubb, and Jerome Ford for Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, and I think it was like a 3rd-round pick. So that's the route I do feel that right now. It's solely because of Jamison Williams. I think that I know the reason I made that move was because of my running back situation. I'm a win now team, and Nick Chubb went down in week 2. So I'm like, hey, I need to make a move to keep this a contender. We also have 3 flex spots and 3 starting wide receivers. So really that's usually at least 5 or 6 wide receivers in those spots. my running backs are weak at that point. They were David Montgomery and Nick Chubb. So I needed a replacement. Happy to take that. Regardless, I think Jameson Williams long term, if I could see that he was eventually going to have this workload, this snap share in the Detroit Lions offense, and they weren't going to add anybody of value at the wide receiver position, I do agree. I would have stuck with what I had. I would have let Jameson Williams ride it out and be that explosive flex spot. So
The
I do
next,
really like.
the
But
next Tyreek, even a step further, he's the heir apparent to Tyreek Hill,
he's not as shifty. He seems as straight line speed fast as Tyreek.
and he's
He's
bigger.
not going. He's not going to make guys
Six-two.
miss like that though. Um, he's not gonna like remember like it at this point it's 4 or 5 years ago, but that underneath throw that the Chiefs threw to Tyreek against the Cowboys, and he just made everyone miss on that defense. Just surprised him with the speed and took off. I don't see Jameson Williams ever being able to do something like that. Truthfully, the only person that I've seen do something like that is Kadarius Toney, but he's such a numbskull that he's never gonna like make the most of his opportunity. And that's with my brownie signing him just a couple days ago. So
Wide
that
receiver one in Cleveland.
yes, over Amari, over Jerry Judy. I'm not even going to make an argument for Elijah Moore, but yes. All right, Mason, I have 3 different things lined up for my overreaction of the week. So I'll let you take away the second one here. What do you got? What's the biggest overreaction from week 1?
So my biggest overreaction, which I'm going to kind of go, Mostert had 6 carries, 9 yards before going out for that injury. He also had 2 receptions for 10 yards as well. HM is also questionable, likely to not play Thursday. Jalen Wright is speed. Both those guys are speed. It works well with McDaniel's play system. I think Jalen Wright's going to honestly come and have a big week, and Mostert is going to end up being one of the biggest busts in this year's draft. I think Jalen Wright's going to work his way into his thing. If Mostert does not come back from his injury quick, I think there's a very easy chance he finds himself not getting many touches in this offense.
Okay. I think I realized right now that when I worded this to you guys on the podcast, I was thinking like overreactions from the league, like from the general public, that you think is an overreaction from everyone else. Because Lee's now saying like Jameson Williams is gonna overtake Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now that I'm thinking about it more, like that's your overreaction to week 1, you're saying, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, I
Yeah.
fucked up, guys. I fucked up. I should have worded it better because that's also an overreaction. You think, Mason, or you think like that's justified? You think Jalen Wright is going to overtake Raheem?
I do think so. If he can come in this next week,
I think both of your guys' takes are overreactions. So like what I have listed here is that likely. I mean, we're past the fob, so it's a little bit, whatever. But likely is going to be involved. He's going to be a part of this offense, but people are going to drop entirely too much fob on him, which we talked about. Like a person in my league dropped 100% of his fob on him. I think that likely is going to be involved, but people are looking way too much into this. Chiefs had a good game plan. Nick Bolton's a good coverage linebacker. If I'm thinking off the top of my head for an overreaction from week 1, damn. Mason, did you want to build on your point for a second more so I can think on the spot of an overreaction on my own side here?
Oh no, I mean honestly, if we were talking more what you actually meant to say, likely probably would have been mine as well.
Right?
Just we're playing really good defense against Andrews. I do think likely there's a good chance that he finishes this next week with under 5 points in standard PPR leagues, or just PPR leagues. I think this just he worked in the game plan. The Chiefs weren't really thinking about him too much, and he found his openings. Andrews is still the number one tight end there. So
Okay. So I'll
I
say
agree.
then. I'm sorry.
I agree that like spending all your FAB on Likely is a pretty big mistake.
Right. Yeah, we were talking about it amongst us because honestly, it's the hardest situation to assess. I do think that likely is worth, I would say, a third of your fob. I would spend up to 30, 35 fob for him in a 100 fob budget league. I don't think he's worth much more than that. I do think Andrews is going to continue to mix in. They're going to run the ball more, and overall likely won't be worth that. I would say my overreaction to week one is the overall doubt on the Atlanta offense. Um, I'm not trying to roster Kirk Cousins quite yet, but like people who are already discounting Drake London, even though Kyle Pitts had the touchdown and made it worthwhile, a lot of people are still looking down on that situation, especially after a first couple years in the league not proving himself. And then even like Bijan had a solid day, but I think overall, all of these pieces are going to be worthwhile. There are three dominant pieces in this offense. When it's a situation like that, we've seen success in the past. Even Clyde Edwards-Helaire was worth a damn when it was just him, Tyreek, and Travis Kelsey. And obviously, the other two pieces were very much worthwhile. So I would say that's my overreaction if we're looking at that sense. If we were looking at it from, and I should have clarified, but I do think that likely, and then Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are going to be fine. Like, let them be. They suck at the beginning of the year. Do you guys think that either of them are going to finish under top 8 at their position?
No, I would take.
Right?
I agree with that. I think they're both top 8
They're
easily.
going to be fine. I've seen people asking me, like friends asking me, like, should I trade Jamar Chase away for Drake London or like guys who have had promise like Jamar Chase, but neither of them delivered. No, absolutely not. Jamar Chase is going to be a top 5 wide receiver, hands down.
Yeah, I mean, once the Bengals really start getting going, Jamar Chase should be a top 10 consistent every week.
100%.
Before we wrap up, I just want to say one, thank you guys to everybody out there watching. We've definitely we see you, we appreciate you. We're on Stadium Rant. Please like, subscribe. There's a lot of great content on Stadium Rant as a whole, guys. We start at 8 p.m. Eastern every week. We'd love to have you here for the entirety of the show, but we appreciate you coming in. Please engage. The people that have engaged in the comments, please continue to do that. That helps us build. That helps us have great rapport back and forth. But ultimately, thank you for being here, and please subscribe and come back next week, guys.
Absolutely. Just like Lee said, every comment that's been here, we will respond to. If you guys have a fantasy question, that's why we're here. We're going to give you our answers as 3 analysts. And as just the 3 of us, we are guaranteed to give you an answer. We're going to lean one way or the other because that's how the numbers lean. So, everybody, have a great week. Thank you for joining us. We're looking forward to more NFL action, and we're going to cover it all throughout the season. Everybody, have a great week.